So you've literally seen thousands and thousands of auditions, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Auditioning is a whole different beast than acting. It's a whole other skill set. So, whether you're coming into the room or whether you're putting together a self-tape.
Jason Kennedy started his career as a talent agent, but quickly switched over to casting some of the biggest and long-running shows on TV, most prolifically NCIS. And Jason's worked on more than 50 different projects, including literally hundreds of episodes of the CBS NCIS spin-off series, but also King and Maxwell, BBC and HBO's Emmy award-winning House of Saddam, Dresden Files, Dawson's Creek back in the day, Living with Fran and Run of the House, plus feature films such as Congratulations, Cursed, Little Thing Called Murder and Cameron Crowe's Elizabethtown. A big WeAudition supporter, he's a proud husband, father of 2 boys, and even finds time to serve on the board of directors of the Casting Society of America.
The process has changed so much. The process is always evolving. And the actors that are successful are the ones who are able to.
Welcome here back to the WeAudition podcast. We've got Jason Kennedy in today. Good to see you, Jason.
You too. Good to see you both.
Hi, Jason. Lovely to see you.
So, Jason, let's jump right in. You are the casting director, as we heard, of one of the biggest shows ever to grace television. So you've literally seen thousands and thousands of auditions, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Anything stand out to you about the auditioning process with somebody that's seen such a wide array of auditions?
Oh, gosh. Every day is different, but and the process is different between, each office, and even over time, it's changed so much just, before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and as we're kind of discovering what the new normal is going to be, hybrid situations, going back to in-person sessions. It's the process is completely, it's always evolving. And the actors that are successful are the ones who are able to adapt. And that's really key, is just be able to jump into whatever the new process is.
Have you found that it's a different breed of actor, a different sort of person that's sort of doing well with the self-tapes and with the hybrids, or do you see the same actors doing really well when you see them in person and when you see them on self-tapes? Or do you think some people do better at one or the other?
Not necessarily. Auditioning in itself is a whole different beast than acting. And so it's a whole other skill set. So, whether you're coming into the room or whether you're, putting together a self-tape, there's a lot of other moving parts involved that are completely aside from performing and getting into a character and researching a role and all of that fun stuff. I think, the actors that are able to tackle that, the audition process, whether it's in the room or via self-tape, are the ones that are definitely going to do well. It's a challenge. Not everyone can really, pull off an audition, as well as just, showing up on set and doing the work. It's a little bit more intimidating sometimes. And you want to get it perfect because you may only have this one chance. And so you'll do it as many times as you can if you have a self-tape opportunity, or if you're in the room, you only really have, that few minutes to do it. So it can be daunting for some. And others just come in and just do their work and have a good time doing it. And they leave it in the room and they walk out, and that's it. And the actors that are able to do that, even in self-tapes, the confidence really comes through, that they're doing their best. This is just a taste of what I can offer. I'm not giving you 100%, it's not necessarily going to be the final product. We all get that. We're not expecting perfect. So if you flub up a little bit, it's not a big deal. But if you could just come in and do your best work and then forget about it and move on to the next thing, then I think you'll be in a much better headspace, moving forward.
Jason, with all the different characters that you've cast in NCIS, because obviously you have your main cast, but then each episode is quite unique in a procedural like that, where you have so many guest stars and co-stars each week versus a drama where you're casting generally for the whole season. How do you stay inspired as a casting director, seeing these thousands of auditions over and over again?
Well, I'm so fortunate to have been on NCIS for as long as I have, and these other spinoffs that keep coming up. It's been really remarkable. I have to say, every episode, yes, is very different than the last. Yes, we have certain procedural elements and characters that will, the grieving widow kind of, there are those very, common characters that, will come up, but there are stories that are so unique and vastly different. We go to different sides of the world. We meet, completely different people. And I'm always finding myself, really intrigued, and I'm researching. I'm like, oh, what is this country I'm not that familiar with? And who are these people? And I'm always, fascinated by that. And because of that, we meet a lot of new actors that we wouldn't have otherwise had an opportunity to meet. And then on the other side of that, there are actors that we fall in love with that, that we would love to find a role for in the show. And we, try to keep them in mind. We bring them in as often as we can, for roles that we think they're right for, until they finally land that perfect role. And sometimes it's years before we find that role for those actors, but we become fans of actors just like anyone else. So we're dedicated and hopeful that will come around.
So am I right in thinking that if you get a role in an NCIS world, and that's the only time that you can be in that world, is that right? So it's like a one and done. You get a guest star, and then that's it.
Not necessarily. I mean, yeah. Listen, I mean, on NCIS for a very long time, we tried not to repeat actors in different roles, and then, of course, as we started approaching, a longer stretch, we convinced our producers, hey, it's been 10, 15 years since we've seen this actor on this show. I don't think anyone's going to remember. He looks completely different, or she's, completely changed and grown so much. Let's give them a shot for something else. And so we have very fortunately, we've been able to bring back actors from the earlier years, and across the universe. If it isn't a role that's so substantial, let's say a series regular or a really major recurring role on NCIS, there's no reason why they couldn't be on one of the other NCIS shows. So long as it makes sense, and, there isn't a crossover episode that's going to, blow things out of the water. We want actors to be able to work. Absolutely. And we keep everyone in mind as much as we can.
Well, on that note about actors being able to work, have you noticed, it seems like there's been a change in the last couple of years about the amount of projects being cast, about the amount being produced. And we had this sort of peak TV era where there were so many things and so many opportunities. And now it seems like it's skimming down. Is that happening? And is that a good thing? Is it more curated, or is there more or less opportunities than before?
I think, there are ebbs and flows in this business, and we were definitely at the height. I feel like we had way too much content for a while. We had almost 600, new scripted television projects in one given year, where 10 years prior, I think we maybe had about 200. And it was, for me personally, it was getting really difficult to keep track of all the shows I wanted to watch because there are just so many. I think, with everything that's happened recently with the strikes, with the pandemic, and sort of this bubble that kind of bursted with way too much content. Yes, I think there's a little bit of a slowdown right now, but I have a feeling it's going to be picking back up once we really get back. This will be our first full season after the pandemic, after the strikes, that hopefully will show a little more robust television season, and then we'll be able to see how things go from there. I hope we see a lot more work for a lot more actors and casting directors. A lot of us have been out of work, and I really, my colleagues have been struggling. A lot of us have moved out of state, and it's been difficult. So yeah, we're all hoping for more work in the coming months.
What does a casting director need? Like, we always talk about what actors need and how actors can get in front of casting directors, but what do you guys need? In a grand sense, in an industry sense.
Oh gosh, well, opportunity for sure. There are a lot of us who are struggling just to have one job, and there are a handful of us who are really fortunate to have grown a business that allows them to cast multiple or even dozens of jobs in a year. And there are quite a few of us that are really struggling, just trying to get that one job to get them through the year and help them make their insurance. And just, having the chance to interview for those jobs is something that we're really having a hard time with.
I think we forget that as actors, actually.
Oh,
There's a perception that casting directors are the gatekeepers and they're there all the time and they're always working with the studios and they have loads and loads of work. But as myself and Darren have been working with WeAudition, it's become really apparent that you're working just the same and it's all part of a team effort. Yeah. And that you have to get the jobs off producers and directors yourselves. And if we're lucky enough to have a producer that knows us and wants to work with us, that's great. But then, we got to get the studio involved, and they have opinions as well, and they may not always agree. They might want to go with a marquee casting director, someone who they feel like is going to bring them bigger stars for some reason. But really, in the end, we all do the same work, and if we're good at our job, then we're good at our job. It really doesn't matter, what name level we are. But yeah, I mean, when we go in for an interview, it's sometimes it's just a conversation. Other times we're presenting ideas. We're doing, we have work that we have to do. So we'll read a script, we'll break down the characters, we'll bring them some ideas for some roles to show them, what we're thinking. And they, use that information to decide, whether or not we're a good fit. And sometimes our ideas make it onto the screen, even if we don't get the job. So,
yeah. As an actor would sometimes in a self-tape, sometimes we've done self-tapes where we've seen a little quirk or something happening. You mentioned big marquee casting names. So I think we're all aware that there's an Oscar coming up for casting, and recently BAFTA, started nominating casting directors. Do you think that's going to help the underdog casting directors get more visibility, or is that those marquee names going to be even more marquee with that accolade?
I think the visibility in itself is really what we've been asking for, and we were successful and very fortunate with the Emmys, and BAFTA was really kind of catapulted the conversation towards the Oscars. They were so wonderful in granting us that recognition. And yes, I feel like, there are independent casting directors. We're all independent. There are casting directors who are casting those independent films, those smaller films, that could get recognized at the Oscars, and even a nomination would help their careers. So absolutely, I'm excited and looking forward to seeing, who makes the first round of nominations.
Amazing.
Too as well.
You actually started with, I believe, UDK, right? In that office?
Yes. So when I moved out here in 2001, I couldn't get a job to save my life. And I had experienced in the talent agency world in Florida. But it just was a struggle. So I was like, okay, I'll just intern wherever I can. And UDK was the first office who was willing to let me intern. And
superheroes, were you basically tasked with going out and finding people to be in that universe? Is that
because they do a lot of CW shows and things like that, right?
Yeah, at the time UDK was doing CSI and Felicity and others those are the ones that I was more closely involved with. But really the way their internship worked back then is you were just there to open the mail. There were lots of headshots shuffling, and filing. But when they knew that I was the only person, everyone there were actors, and I was the only person who really wanted to get into casting at the time. So they let me come, to some sessions and help out with some things and answer calls and things like that. So that was really great. But that wasn't the only office I interned at. They really only could use me 1 or 2 days a week. So I went to Junie Lowry Johnson's office and Gilda Stratton and Deb Barilski and whoever I could really just learn from. And then within a few months, I had landed my first assistant job with Julie Ashton.
Julie's great. Julie's great. She's like you. She's a real advocate for actors, I find.
Oh, she's wonderful. She really is really one of my favorite people.
So you've bounced around a bunch of different genres, really.
Yes. Yeah. Loved comedy. I mean, right after Julie Ashton, I started working with Greg Orson. and Leslie Gellis, and they were doing Dawson's Creek and Reba. So we had, sort of a soapy drama, and we had a half-hour comedy, and they did a lot of other CW, WB and CW shows, and that was a really fun office.
Do you think like casting directors get pigeonholed? Because as an actor, sometimes you might get the same role over and over again. Do you think that's the same with casting directors?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't know that someone would look at my resume after being on NCIS for almost 20 years and think that I can cast comedy. But that's kind of where I started. That was my world. And even on NCIS, it's a show that has an element of humor. And we're constantly having to find actors who are funny on the show. Completely different than sitcom, obviously. But yeah, I know funny for sure.
Yeah. Do you have a dream job that you wish you had cast but didn't for some reason, or that you want to do in the future?
I get excited about projects that I hear coming out, and would love to cast it. I was a big fan of the Fallout game. So when I heard that Fallout was being made into a series, I was like, oh, I'd love to cast. I knew they already had somebody lined up. And they did such a wonderful job with the show. And I remember when I first got into casting and I was interviewing for assistant jobs, I had an opportunity to interview for The West Wing, which was my favorite show at the time. And I wanted that job so bad that I probably embarrassed myself with my giddiness and excitedness for it. So yeah, needless to say, I didn't get that job, but I definitely was a fan.
Was that you were a fan of Aaron Sorkin particularly, or there's type
and the cast? Yeah, I mean, I did enjoy the fast talking, the walking, talking, part of that universe, but the cast was just brilliant, and I was excited for the opportunity to be a part of it.
So you would have come on after the show had started.
Yes. Yeah, I think it was probably a few years into it, and one of the questions I was asked was, who should the next president be, and I was like, oh God, it needs to be a woman, and and I was I was a little not starstruck, but I just really was excited to.
And I guess that was with John Frank Levy as well, who you were going to work with, right, for that?
It was another casting director who took over.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
If someone was going for something like The West Wing and it was all walkie-talkie, would you like a self-tape where they're just walking and someone's taping them, or like it's very difficult to do that sort of style, isn't it? You'd have to sort of do it on a backdrop.
You kind of have to embody that essence without the movement. Yeah, it's really about the cadence and the pacing and really having a reader, if you have a reader that can match that with you. Yeah.
Oh, let's talk about readers, because that's obviously something that WeAudition is all about, is providing a good reader for a self-tape. And I know you have been very much an advocate of the in-person audition. Have they come back, the in-persons, or are you finding it's all self-tape still? And if so, how important is that reader in that self-tape?
So yes, for some offices, and it all really depends on the production. In-person has come back to a certain extent. I think, for, and again, I'm in my own little world here. I don't talk to, all my colleagues about how they operate, but I have heard that there are, people having in-person sessions and that's all they do. Mm-hmm. And others that are doing a hybrid and others that are still sticking with virtual or self-tapes. For NCIS Origins, we did virtually everything with self-tapes and virtual. And then when we had these larger series, regular recurring roles, some of those roles we would, if we, as we narrowed it down to 4 or 5 people, we would bring them into the room, have an in-person, session, sort of a test situation, but just with our producers, cameras, and lights and whatnot. And I would be the reader. And that was the process for that.
And that was like a test on set, was it?
Yeah, but it was. We rented a little studio, and it was nice. It was nice.
If you'd like to join the WeAudition community, go to weaudition.com/show to get 25% off. Now back to the show.
Can you walk through the process of that for any actors that have never tested, quote unquote? What's the process? So they is it only for series regulars? Talk to us like we know nothing. Tell us from the point when you get that call, what happens in a test and how should actors be prepared for it?
Sure. I mean, this has changed a lot over the years. In-person testing used to be in a room filled with executives, and that seems to have gone away. Although I've heard that it still happens in some manner at some places. But for us, yes, you would get the call. This is what's happening on this day. We want to structure a test option deal, which is basically the studio is going to negotiate a deal with your reps, so that if you get the role, the deal's already in place. We don't have to worry about it after the fact. And so that can be a little stressful, and that takes some time. Usually there's about a week's notice before we.
How many of those would you do? 3 or 4, did you say?
I would say probably no more than 6 or 7 max. It depends. We might only have 2 or 3 choices that we want to test, but we might have so many that that we're having a hard time narrowing it down. So we bring in 6 or 7, and then from there we narrow it down to 2 or 3, and then we have.
And they all have a deal in place before they hit the studio floor.
Usually, yes.
A lot of work. Wow.
Yeah.
Is this just for series regulars or recurring as well?
Series regulars, yes.
Right.
Recurring situation, that negotiation will probably happen after we've chosen somebody. And for Origins, when we had people come in, we'd give them about a week's notice. We'd tell them where to go, and they would come in. It was, very warm. We try to make it a very warm experience, because alternatively, with a bunch of executives in the room, as warm as we try to make it, it's still not. It's not ideal. It sometimes feels like a cold room. So for us, we really try to make it as inviting as possible. And we'll chat a little bit. We'll, mic the actor, and we'll run the scenes a few times, give some notes, chat some more. And then that's it.
Is it within a set with props and everything like it would be on the real day?
It's really just a nice for this particular experience. It was really just a nice small studio with professional lights and a backdrop and maybe a chair, and I would stand off camera, and the producers would be sitting pretty close. And yeah, it was pretty. I mean, really, it could be a self-tape situation in a professional studio.
I don't know about you, Darren. I find that so stressful. Like on set, I'm fine. I do it every day. Fine. But that situation where you walk in, I've done it a million times for commercials. So stressful when you have 3 or 4 people in suits sitting there, and they're pretty much looking at their lunch or their coffee, and then you walk in and you say hello to your casting director, and you have to then nail it first time. I find that so stressful, and I don't think I come across at my best. But a self-tape, I think, allows me to do it without having that stress of those eyeballs.
Do you think that's because you're worried about nailing it first time, when what we're hearing is that you don't need to? It's a collaboration, right?
Maybe. I just think I feel that energy off of all those people, and it confuses my brain, and I can't concentrate on what I've rehearsed. Yeah. But in a self-tape, I don't have that, so I just record it. And usually I send out the first or the second take anyway, because I think that's usually your best. But there's not much difference, I don't think, between 1 and 10 takes. But do you feel that energy when people walk in? Are actors sometimes nervous when they're in the room, or is that just me being weird?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, the adrenaline is pumping, and you're still, you're still taking in, your environment, as well as the people in the room, and trying to assess, where am I going to be, what's happening, who am I dealing with, and it's difficult. Some actors get tunnel vision and they go right to the chair, and they're glued to it, and they're having a hard time, adjusting from what they've already plan to do. And it's really just about, being able to come in and be adaptable and flexible. And really, in addition to performing and giving your best, you also want to come off as the person that we want to work with. Because we're not just casting an actor, we're casting an employee, somebody that we're going to want to spend time with. And if you can let go of those jitters and just be your pleasant self, then it'll make the experience so much better.
This is a good segue, Jason, into one of the things that we always advocate with WeAudition is about building community, right? And we have these events around the world where people connect with casting directors and agents and other actors. And one of the questions I'm always asked by actors, or a compliment I always get, is, "Oh, you know a lot of people. That must be really good for your career," right? Mm-hmm. Now, actors grumbles more recently is we don't get in the room, so we don't get to meet the casting directors and things like that. How important do you think is making relationships with people in casting, producers, directors, filmmakers? I don't like the word networking, but you know what I mean when I say that. And is there a familiarity that's too much, where you end up being friends and not seen as professional? And I don't mean in a bad way, in a misbehaving way, mm-hmm. but where the mystery of talent is gone, where that's just, oh, that's my friend over there, and you don't think of the actors as the professional actors or potential stars that they are.
Interesting. I have had situations where I have had friends before I really knew them as actors, where I feel like I'm biased, or I'm not quite, I don't know. I see them in a different light. And so I'll ask my colleagues, I'll rely on them to help me out. But no, I have plenty of friends who are actors that I know totally what their talent is and what they're capable of. And even if I have doubts, I might still give them a shot, because I want to see them succeed and do well. No, I think, going into a relationship with somebody, I wouldn't necessarily pursue a friendship with somebody unless it was something that felt mutual. I wouldn't be aggressive about it. I do have some actors that maybe reach out a little too much, and it feels a little forced. And it should just be something that happens natural and has to be mutual. But yeah, networking, it can be a kind of an icky thing. I'm not a huge fan of, I'm also socially awkward, so I'm not really a huge fan of going out and, schmoozing with people. But it is important to have good relationships with people in this business, and to be, recognized as someone who is professional and capable and reliable. And I think, those are qualities you can get across without being, a little slippery and slimy.
Right. And it comes back to what you're saying about, ultimately you're looking at that person being like, do we want to work with this person potentially for years on a set? And so it's not sort of nepotism, or it's not forced in that way. I always say to people, it's a long game as well. I mean, relationships are built over time. It's not about making a quick friendship and it resulting in an offer or something, even with going to film festivals or events or being involved. So my advice to people generally when they ask me that question is just be as authentic as you can, and go without wanting something at the end of it. Really, really the key.
And to that end, I mean, when you get a job and you're on set, you're not just doing your job. You also want to make other people's lives easier. You should want to make other people's lives easier. So, when you've got ADs that you have to deal with, or rather have to deal with you, make their lives easier. Be on time, be attentive, be on set instead of, in your trailer all the time. Watch what's going on, and watch how the cameras move, watch how the crew interacts with each other, so that when you're on set, you're ready to go and you're not asking questions, and you know how things operate, because everyone will remember that. They'll remember that you're somebody that is on top of it, and they want to work with you again. And who knows what might come out of that.
Even actors going to set for the first time, like an NCIS, what's if they've never been on a big set like that, if you've cast a co-star or a guest star and they're going in on their first day, what's some do's and don'ts? Because you mentioned one there, like don't be in your trailer all day. But then I know an actor that might think, well, that's where I've been told to be.
They do actually, don't they? They want you,
and I don't want to not be where they think I'm not going to be, or am I getting in the way if I'm watching on set? And talk us through the process from turning up on that day. Like how, what should you do when you first get to set?
You know, your point of contact is usually one of your ADs. It could be the second or the second, who deals with you primarily, and they are the people that you can ask all these questions. I want to be present. I want to be available. You know, tell me what you would like me to do. You know, if it's appropriate, I would love to, you know, to watch, you know, some filming before mine or whatever. Ask them questions without being, you know, too much, and they'll guide you. You know, they'll tell you exactly what to expect. They know how everything operates, and they're your guide throughout the entire shoot. And you know, just be pleasant. I mean, it seems ridiculous to have to say this, but be pleasant to everybody, whether they're a PA or a chef or a driver. So long as you're there to have a good time and make the experience a good experience for everyone else, then it'll be great.
Yeah, it really is a people business. Have you ever had something, you alluded to it there, have you ever had a situation whereby someone has nailed that audition, but they've gone on set and had no experience and it's been a disaster? How do you mitigate that with just self-tapes? How do you?
No, I don't think I've had someone nail an audition and not be able to pull it out on set. Certainly, you know, I've had, you know, directors come back and say, you know, it was you know, it might have taken some time or whatever. But I mean, I feel like we're pretty thorough and in vetting actors. And we have a lot of voices in the room, who are part of the process. So, I don't think we've had anybody that's really, you know, tanked it, and we definitely haven't had anyone we had to recast for that reason, so that's good.
Right.
Well, yeah, that would be expensive.
Exactly.
One of the things I love about you, Jason, as well, is you're so supportive of the upcoming talent. I always see you post every episode. You give some props to the cast. That's so lovely that you do that on social media, and I'm guessing for the actors, that's just an extra like accolade or an extra bit of visibility and validation that other casting directors see in your sphere and stuff like that. So that's really wonderful. You mentioned ADs there as well. So one of the things I personally know about you is you have a charity with a couple of ADs from the NCIS world called Everyday Action. And I love the way you use your leverage of what you do to give back to the community. Can you tell our listeners about Everyday Action and how they can get involved?
Oh, yeah. Everyday Action is an amazing nonprofit that was started by two assistant directors on NCIS Los Angeles. And they started it right after the pandemic. And essentially, for years, you know, they've been seeing all this food that the catering would put out and not, you know, food that wasn't served, leftover food. And they just had to throw it away at the end of the day. There wasn't a method for this food to be salvaged and to be redistributed somewhere else. And so they started this organization, and essentially they take this leftover food and they deliver it to people in need, people who are unhoused or suffering, you know, food insecurity. They'll go to missions, they'll go to shelters, they'll deliver it directly to people on the street. And they actually employ production assistants and background performers to make these deliveries, these pickups and deliveries. And so it's just an amazing work. We've served, I want to say, over 240,000 meals and items of food in the last 4 years, almost 4 years. And we're growing, and it's just, I'm really hopeful that this will be an industry standard. Not every production does this. We have to go production by production, begging and pleading to pick up their leftover food. And it's not an easy ask every time. But I'm hoping in the next year or so that this will be something that's done everywhere.
Who is it on a production that sort of forces that? Is it does the cast have any sway in that? How could our members or how could actors be involved with that and help that
Well,
cause?
yeah, I mean, absolutely. Anyone with leverage can a star of a show, a series regular of a show can certainly have a major influence. We typically go to the line producer or the UPM. They're the ones that make these decisions. And of course, it all depends on whether they actually have catering. Some shows don't have catering. But yeah, if there is anyone who's on a production that would like to have food rescue be part of their operation, that would be wonderful, because it really does. It makes such a huge difference to see the faces of these people who are receiving the food, and they're so grateful, and it's just, yeah, it's.
And is this just in the LA area?
For now, yes. It's a 90-mile radius in the LA area that we're able to go. We hope to expand in the future, but we need more resources, more funding, and it is our long-term goal to expand in other markets.
Great. So if any of the actors listening to this show, if you're in that LA 90-mile area and you're on a show and you have that series regular power or whatever, you can get in touch with Everyday Action. What's the website? youreverydayaction.org, right?
That is it.
Youreverydayaction.org. Any other ways people can support if they want to be involved in another way, in another capacity?
Absolutely. On the website, you can sign up to volunteer. You can sign up for our newsletter. I think we only release a newsletter about once a month. We try to do fundraising events about every month. I think we're doing Drag Queen Bingo on June 16th next month. So that's a really fun fundraiser. And yeah, volunteering is a great opportunity. And of course, donations. We need donations. It funds our drivers. It funds our gas, and just being able to get out there and do all that we can.
Amazing. So when I was going through our social media for questions that the actors want to know, one of the burning questions that keeps coming up for these interviews is, how do I move from a co-star to a guest star, or a guest star to a series regular in my career? So if we've got a lot of actors in our listener group, they're very experienced. They've done many co-stars, many guest stars, but this question always comes up is, when do I turn down a role? Is it looked poorly upon me if I do that, or do you guys decide when we're ready for the?
Maybe it's out of their control. Maybe you just go for everything. I don't know.
Right.
No, I mean, yeah. I mean, I will have my own opinions about an actor and their abilities, of course, and I might, think that an actor is not ready for a certain level of a role. But you have to know if you're ready, and if you feel like this 1 or 2 line co-star is just not enough for you, then turn it down. That's okay. I will not think less of you, because I completely appreciate that that you need to make those difficult decisions. And some people really need the work, especially right now when there's not a lot of it, and they're willing to take whatever comes their way. And others want to be a little more selective for a number of reasons, for their time, for their career, and I admire that. I think that's you need to really be able to be mindful of those things. Making that transition is something that's going to happen, naturally. You are, the more you put yourself out there, the more opportunities, the more we're going to be able to see what you're capable of, the more we might be likely to try you for bigger and better roles. Many actors who I met on one-line roles where I was like, oh wow, there's something really interesting about them. I feel like they could do a little bit more, and I give them an opportunity for more. And then within a few auditions, I'm having them read for guest stars. So you also have to trust that we're going to recognize that and see that and give you that opportunity eventually. It's a delicate balance for a lot of people. I know people feel a little uneasy about turning down a role, but if it feels like it's just not for you, let us know. If you're only going out for 1-day guest stars and above, then that's fine. It's good to keep in mind. We might not think you're ready for that. That's our opinion. But maybe there will be a 1-day guest star that we would be willing to give you a shot at eventually.
Do you turn down the role, or do you turn down the audition?
You pass on the role.
So you advise the actors to still audition for it, but if they get offered it, they...
No. Yeah, you turn down the audition.
Turn down the audition.
Turn down the audition by passing the role, and it's helpful to know why. We always try to find out from reps why someone passed on a role, whether it's the material that they just didn't respond to, they couldn't connect with the character, or the role's too small, or whatever other reasons. Sometimes we get passes on roles, and it's not even a pass on the role. It's because they're not available, and we're like, we want to know exactly what's going on, because it also informs us for the future.
What would you say to the actor that says, you know what, I don't want to do the small roles at all in my career. I only want to go in right at the top. Let's say they're fresh to LA, they've done their drama degree, and they feel like ready for the big time, but they're like, I don't want to bother with these small little roles here and there, or these one days. I just want to go in for series regulars. What do you say to those?
Good luck. Some people are able, with the right agent and manager, they might be able to get those opportunities, but that's hard. And listen, fresh out of school, you might have more opportunities, because when you're looking for someone young, they're not going to have a lot of experience. But if it were me, I would want to sink my teeth into whatever I could and experience whatever I could, meet whoever I can, and just, do the work and have a good time doing it. Eventually I feel like, I would get to the place that I would want to be. I unless you need to be a star right now, just, experience the industry and the process and just try to have fun doing it.
Well, it's interesting because, Richard, you worked with an actor last year on Gran Turismo, David Harbour. And I remember an interview with him talking about how he was going at it for years, wasn't he? And he's done all sorts of smaller roles before he became the star of David Harbour. I think sometimes people forget that whoever's at the top of their game right now, they've done a lot of groundwork.
Yes.
You learn on absolutely everything. And I'm sure, Jason, you learn on every project you do, and you learn different actors and different places and jigsaw pieces together. And I feel like every time that I've been on a project, I've learned something different, because it's different size projects, different people, and different ways of working, and different sizes and different characters. And I feel, it's always a learning process. That's part of the joy of it, isn't it? Yeah. In my opinion.
And it happens all the time. You have a journeyman actors like David Harbour who, have been working nonstop their entire career. And then you just have that one role that becomes, a critical hit. And you never know when these things are going to pop up. You just got to do your best work and enjoy it. And that's really what it's all about.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thank you so much for joining us here on the WeAudition podcast. Do you have any final thoughts, Rich, before we wrap this up?
No, I just want to say thank you, Jason, for your support from WeAudition and your support for all of the actors, really. I think you're known, and I feel like you're known as someone who supports actors and really appreciates what we do, and the struggle sometimes, and the ups and the downs. So I want to say thank you from me and from our members, and I think you do really good things for actors, and we appreciate that and notice.
Well, thank you, Richard and Darren. I mean, I'm really appreciative of you two and what you do with WeAudition, and I know the community is really thankful. So really, thank you so much for providing a service and a community of actors that really helps embolden for lack of a better term, the talent that's out there, and just be able to work together and be supportive of each other. So,
thank you, Measles.
Thank you so much. Cheers, Jason.
Thanks for listening to the WeAudition Show. Your hosts were Darren Darnborough and me, Richard Cambridge, from WeAudition, the leading professional actors community where you can connect, learn, elevate your career, and always get a self-tape reader on demand. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're a WeAudition member, or even if you're not, we would love it if you could please subscribe to this podcast, as it really helps us. And if you have friends who might get value from this episode, please share the link with them. You can find us at weaudition.com, or for your iPhone or iPad by searching WeAudition on the App Store. See you next time.